That's quite something, yes. Yes, it is, but you never fail to surprise. Yes. So it's great to have everybody back. I gather you didn't make any announcements, but if you notice on the syllabus, I'm having only 5 sessions because I have to give a final examination on the last day. I want to give it to you, but I'm too kind-hearted and saintly. So
I think you're too cheap to buy blue books.
yeah, that too. But yes, conservative is the
Oh,
word.
thank you.
Okay.
I stand corrected.
Fiscally conservative. Yeah, that was ugly. A slur against my good name. I can be extravagant, but you need to be prepared as if it were a final. But yeah, I've got to give it it's May 2nd at 2:00. Can you believe it? That is so bizarre. And the youngsters are so excited. They're saddened by the end of the class, but they're also thrilled to get to share knowledge with me. You know, it's kind of a love fest, really. But that will be the final. However, now this is a shameless plug for a program that will occur at this very time the next Tuesday at 2:00. Now, is that a coincidence? It's May the 9th. So please note that, because many of you already know my friend David Carter. You may have heard him, and he's done some Ollie talks. He teaches American civil rights history at Auburn for the past 20 years. Just a kid to me, but he is quite a favorite of mine, human to human, I mean, not just collegiality. His father, Dan Carter, is famous for his book on the Scottsboro Boys, and some of you have read that. And Dan Carter is going to present his new book on Asa Carter, no relation, who was one of George Wallace's chief men, and also in a variety of perspectives was a fascinating character because he sort of changed over to another side. So that's May the 9th at 2:00, and I do recommend it. I'll be here, and he wanted me to announce it, and knowing me, I'll probably mention it again, but I really think you'd enjoy it. And so, because so many are here today, people who are interested in these topics, I thought you would enjoy it. And David is a great historian himself, but his father, Dan, is with that Scottsboro book and so many about, he's really a George Wallace expert, is what I would say is his claim to fame. And he was a professor, came to Emory right after I graduated, and has had a great career. Dan Carter is his name. So here we are in a series of lectures, and the whole topic of how do we clean up this area of diplomatic history, which of course ended in 1939 because that's when the war started. However, we know that history doesn't always operate the way we want it to in terms of starts and finishes, as in objectivity. And even though, you know, we tell people this is this to that, we know that there's sometimes sort of in periods that events keep going. And that's essentially what I want to talk to you about this spring term, 5 sessions, and particularly having to do with our wonderful friends in Poland and Finland, who are very much affected by this event, though we don't think about it since they are not the size of course, Germany and the Soviet Union. Significant nonetheless. Now let's do a little review. I'm sure you remember the non-aggression pact of Hitler and Stalin with von Ribbentrop flying to Moscow. I don't think that needs to be reiterated. What a big event that was everywhere. Can you just imagine if they had had the media of today? People would have, I mean, they went crazy for the media of that time, but imagine now. I don't know if anyone, though, could guess what was being said secretly, because publicly the agreement was that there would be no aggression between the Soviet Union and Germany. In other words, we won't fight each other and we won't join with anyone who is fighting against each other. And that's essentially it. Because I was reading, in fact, that perhaps it was the Germans wanted to add something about we're crazy about each other and, and all of that. And the Soviets said, don't you think maybe that's a little much? We kind of, let's cut back on the hugs and, no carpenters, if I can just add a more contemporary reference. But the idea was an agreement, and boy, howdy, the Poles knew something was up and not good for them. And you'll recall, some of you, that the Poles had already basically gotten a guarantee from the British and the French. By this point, the French are following the British. And the British, Colonel Beck, had gone to London, some of you will remember, and the British had said, okay, we will stand with you. And of course, the French said, we, meaning we'll do it too. So that is exactly what happened. The war began the first day of September, the invasion. Mr. Chamberlain, the British leader, warned the Germans through his ambassador. Some of you will remember Sir Neville Henderson. And, he just said, I hate to remind you, but we did tell the Poles, please don't do this. It's like that. And it's like, yeah, right. I'm sure that's gonna persuade him. But the 3rd of September, essentially the war began. Some of you remember the recording of Chamberlain's voice. It was Sunday at 11 a.m. all over Britain, the announcement of war. Interestingly, however, not war against the Soviets, war against the Germans. So we'll see about that. And of course, we all love the music of Sibelius. So we're going to have a discussion of Finland and their role in this, because they were important now and they were important then, as we shall see, in terms of the Soviet-German conflict. When it is a case of sharing and being together and no, I'm not going to sing like some people. I may do it in the shower, in the privacy of my own shower, but not in public. I don't do performances. I don't get enough money. But anyway, the idea being that essentially the Germans went too far. And when the Soviets realized how far the Germans had gotten, the Soviets said, you know, we need to get our share of Poland. Perhaps we're going to lose some that belongs to us. You say, well, what about the Poles? Yeah. It's just us and the Germans, right? So that is what will happen. They get as far as, or the place is well known to us. It's in Belarus today. You know where that is. At a place important to me because of the treaty between the Soviets and the Germans ending their World War I participation. Brest-Litovsk. And you can go there now. Well, not now, but I would not, even the most enthusiastic Chamber of Commerce would not say, yeah, got maps, I've got hotel rates, special. No. Oh, you know, on the Auburn War Eagle trip, that you could all come together. No, not now, not now. So there at Brest-Litovsk, you have this meeting. And I've often thought about this. Was it sincere? You big Russian? No, you're German. You're so important. I don't know. It's very hard to imagine what it would have been like for them to have been together. So I think we have to use some historical imagination. I'm sure the German cigarettes were better than what the Soviets. So I'm sure if they had said, hey, you want one of our cigs or something like that, yeah, you know, and all of that, I mean, there would have been some ecumenical spirit. And of course, they are soldiers. So they have that in common. It's not like when you see these people, they're not going like, you know, I'm a big shot. You know who I am? You know, I think they're not exactly rank and file, but some of them are. But I think essentially it's sort of like a reunion, you know, that you go to and you get together and say, hi, how you doing? Oh, I love that part of the Soviet Union. Yeah. You know, that. Oh, yeah. You know, the missus and I went to Heidelberg last year. So, yeah, I mean, it's like, surely there must have been some chit chat going on here. And then, of course, the idea being the Germans are going to evacuate. So that's why we're playing nice, right? Because this is going to be Soviet territory. So we will now have that opportunity.
There we go.
Okay, so that will start up because it will show you a bit of footage from those events. Do I need to do something? Okay.
It's time. It'll start.
Okay. So that is the agreement. As you'll recall, back in August, and the invasion and beginning of war is officially September the 1st, and September the 3rd, the British and French declare war on Germany. So historians regard that as the beginning of the war. And it's the 25th of September when the Soviets come in. And they come in, of course, because the Germans have gone too far eastward, and there is concern, shall we call it, about that. So you have this idea of share and play nice. I mean, because you see all the saluting and parading and all of that, but you can get the idea of what's going on. As they say on the football field, push them back, way back. So the Germans have got to go back westward. And I'm not altogether sure they objected to that. The main thing, of course, is understanding that there's essentially no more Poland. You can see the parts of Poland that the Germans had taken, and I thought this was sort of interesting. Look south of Poland, the Slovaks. You remember the Slovaks, as in Czechoslovakia? Yeah. So what are they doing? They're saying, we would like to help. And of course, the Germans say, okay, you can be our little buddy. It's got like Gilligan's Island. So like, you see Slovakia down there, and they're coming in, and you're thinking, are they just trying to be good neighbors? I'm not thinking so. I'm thinking they are going to try to increase their interests in that southern part of Poland. So there you have the arrows there. And again, you can see the areas that the Germans will take. Again, I don't want you to think that they're going to incorporate that, because the Germans don't so much want to bring Poles into Germany so much as to have control over those lands. So there's a big difference. You will understand that this is a case of dominating rather than trying to merge and say, we want Germans and Poles to be friends and to get together. It's nothing of the sort. Got another map for you, because I found this map so interesting. What I wanted to show you, and you could see Poland, and those of you know Poland will see various places that will sound familiar to you. Sadly, of course, you'll be familiar with Auschwitz, but down south. But you'll see how far the area goes that's controlled by Nazis. See, Warsaw there, that was part of the agreement. And then who knows how far these areas are, 100 miles. Whatever the case, there begins the Soviet part. And of course, from the perspective of the Soviets, this is like getting some vengeance for what they had already been through after World War I. This is really our land in the first place. And I'm sure the Poles didn't feel that way, but I suspect the Soviets did. We're getting back what's really ours in the first place. In any event, isn't it interesting? Look what's, for those of you really good eyesight, go eastward. You see Ukraine, Yeah. Talking about today's headlines. I mean, it's kind of interesting when you think about it, isn't it? That how this kind of is right in the area with which people are concerned. But all of that is to say that by October the 1st, you might think, well, everything is great. Why are the British and French at war? I mean, there's no more Poland. So, and, it seemed like the Germans and Soviets were real happy. So why do we have to have any more conflict, that kind of thing? Because I always bring up to my students, I try to say, well, think about it. If you were a Ukrainian pacifist today, what do you think would be the chances that you would get lots of friends? And I think not many, right? Because I'm trying to get them to understand pacifism is a tough road to hoe sometimes, isn't it? So I think there was enough, shall we call it, lobbies, maybe Czechs and Poles, and who were saying, you British and French need to get going. You better do something. Remember, you left us in the lurch. So I'm thinking there were some lobbyists, diplomatic lobbyists and the British and the French, as you know, really did not know what to do. We enter into that period, which will be called the phony war, which will last until Eastertide of 1940. Can you believe it? In other words, it's kind of hard to say whether we're at war or not. We as Americans had no commitments in this. So, I'm sure that many people were interested in it, but across the Atlantic Ocean. So you won't be surprised that there was a lot of this is really not our concern or that sort of thing. But whatever the case, it was definitely a commitment of the British and the French. And of course, you're wondering about down south. No, I don't mean Georgia and Alabama. I mean in the lovely, beautiful city of Rome, which many of you have visited. And you're thinking, I wonder how Il Duce felt. I think he was hurt, not mad, but he was hurt. I sit by my telephone. He has my number. Does he think I'm washing my hair that often? Why didn't he call and we could be together? It's but we've got that special relationship. Has he lost the feeling? How can we get the feeling again? Another shower favorite. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not at all like that. Very, very strange for the Italians at this point. Now, for those who love the music of Sibelius, yes, and Finland, I understand that the Finns are among the most amazing skiers and tangoists. Isn't that interesting? Fans have a lot going for them. And I understand their application has been accepted by NATO. So I'm real excited. So that they pass muster. I guess you have to go through Rush and committee votes on you. Yeah, go ahead.
They have a statue of Sibelius, huge, but it's just his head, of the head coming out of the ground.
Where's that, Helsinki?
Helsinki, yes.
Yeah, they know. Sibelius, every time I hear Finlandia, I think about this winter war. Yeah, it's a so you all have been there. Y'all have been to Helsinki. It's a beautiful place. And it's a little cold for me though. I'd rather go to Daytona. But Helsinki, I love the photographs. Yeah. So we'll see that. The Winter War has to do essentially, I think, with the Soviet desire to not so much control Finland as establish a protective relationship, because they know sooner or later the Germans are going to be an issue. Finland itself has a very interesting, I'll call it, background. Finns are in some ways connected to their neighbor Sweden, but they're also connected with the Soviets because they had at one time been under the authority of the Russian Tsar. On the other hand, here is a third fun fact. They are of the ethnicity of Hungarians. I know. Bring that up and see how impressed people will be. Yeah, all including your tuition. That's just another fact. Hungarians and fans, who would have thought? I guess it's language. Because you wouldn't say to a Hungarian, like, aren't you all cousins to the Czechs? I don't think. But think of Finland. It's just historical going back centuries, depending on where they settled. And it's a long way between Finland and Hungary, isn't it? So, but it's a linguistic reality. So this war, November of 1939, just in case you've forgotten our dates, remember, we just finished with Poland in October. So now we get this Soviet-Finnish business, and it's not long. So in that sense, it's very different from the current crisis, isn't it? Which is going on. This one is quite brief because, of course, the Soviets are obviously a much larger authority, as we will see. Now, this again, I think, is an amazing bit of what I'm going to call propaganda, but I don't mean it in any negative way. I just mean the use of advertising, create sympathy. Presumably they would show this, as some of us will remember, in movie theaters to get people, maybe while you're starting on your popcorn or you're getting ready for the movie, maybe Humphrey Bogart or something. And then they show something like this. And when I first saw this, I was just thinking, I've just got to share this because I think it's so interesting.
Finland, a country of scenic beauty, enchanted lakes, and stately forests, a goodly land, a land apart, a people of the soil, contented, peace-loving folk, living in neighborly harmony, in the simple way of life. Finland's cities are modern, pulsed with energy, industry, progress. Enjoying the highest standards of housing. outstanding examples of architecture by Finland's famous Saarinen. Jan Sibelius, preeminent Finnish composer, to the immortal strains of whose soul-stirring symphony Finlandia we are now listening. A people of honor dedicated to the principles of democracy, Finland proudly meets its debt payment to the United States with an on-time check.
Mr. Secretary, I have the honor to present to you this check in further payment of Finland's indebtedness to the government of the United States.
Mr. Minister, I accept with gratitude this payment. And I should like to congratulate your country, which during dark days as well as fair, has never failed to honor its obligations.
Paavo Nurmi, the world's fastest long-distance runner. Tribute to Finland's athletic supremacy. Here with his fellow countryman and protege, Taisto Mäki, in frontline uniform, fresh from defense of their homeland.
We bring to you, citizens of America, fond greeting from our people who are now fighting for their very lives. Finland may be a small nation, but our love of freedom will never let us accept defeat.
War has gripped Europe, a war of oppression, striking terror to the hearts of innocent millions. Tiny Finland is the latest victim of this unprovoked and ruthless aggression, and its peaceful cities and countryside are soon laid waste by the ravages of the giant bombers whose missiles rain death and destruction from the skies. Entire business districts are wiped out. Schools, churches, homes, and even hospitals cannot escape the devastating onslaught. Aroused to the point of valor transcending human bonds, brave little Finland fights on. And out of this chaos of darkness and despair gleams a light of hope. A friendly hand reaches across the ocean, extending help to a stricken nation.
In Finland today, the world witnesses one of those heroic stands for freedom of men that come but few times in centuries. A government in war is faced with two tasks. The first is the fighting on the front. The second is the care of the civil population. In modern war, they are equally important. If the civil population shall starve or lose their morale, the army will fail. By any help we can give the civil population, we release the resources of the Finnish government to be used for the front. But beyond all that, this is a call of humanity. The needs of the people are desperate. The refugees from continuous air raids need food. They need shelter. Their breadwinners are at the front. Soon the whole nation must have supplies from abroad. There are daily new emergencies where America can respond to the call of the distressed humanity without involving ourselves in war. Never has there been a more appealing cause. It is for us to accept this obligation in the name of humanity. We have the resources to do it without depriving our own people. If we serve Finland today, we are protecting those ideals in the world for which our nation stands. We can make a reality of the sympathy that lies in the hearts of the American people.
From our love shall rise so bright our nation's future, hope and might, and higher yet shall ring more strong our patriotic song.
Well, obviously, advertising of this sort has come a long way since 1939, but you can see the parallels, which I thought made that worth sharing with you. And of course, I think it's very interesting who is the presenter there, because he becomes the sort of American face of support for Finland, Herbert Hoover. He had been cast out as president in 1932. And this was part of a whole new, you might say, career for him of being a sort of supporter for those who were dealing with these obviously very difficult times. And so he becomes very involved. So the film we saw was probably done in the fall of 1939, for sure. And a lot of fundraising was going in, a lot. And I'm not aware that, of course, the United States government was involved in this, nor was there a NATO back then, nor was, as far as I'm aware, the League of Nations as a force. So in general, the Finns were frankly on their own in terms of dealing with the Soviets. And again, this is the end of 1939, and the
Finland, a country of scenic beauty, enchanted lakes,
Finns would think about it now. Don't think they would care for that sort of thing. They consider themselves rightly quite more sophisticated than that. But are we okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. This, of course, is an American political cartoonist version of what's going on. So you get the sort of gendered idea of the Soviet Union being some sort of big meanie, and Finland being some slender, attractive woman. So villain, yes. I mean, you get the idea. Again, I'm not sure that would go over too well now, but this was 1939, so I guess they had different concepts, different ideas. But again, trying, of course, to show the Soviets in the worst kind of way. And again, I want us to appreciate that, because remember, 1941, 42, they're going to be our friend. I believe FDR called him Uncle Joe. Yeah. So we understand that sometimes relationships, we just don't know. Love can break out in places we never expect it to, right? So it's obviously not a wrang-up. And, you know, this would break Litvinov's heart. Remember Litvinov, the ambassador to the League of Nations, and all those great times we used to have in Geneva, and having borscht and just visiting with everybody. And now we're going to get the boot. Yep. The only time the League of Nations ever kicked anybody out. Is that embarrassing? I mean, you could have kicked out Italy, Germany, Japan, but no, they got to resign. You can't resign. We want to throw you out. No, I don't know about those Soviets, whether they actually tried to resign before they got the boot, but they did, sure did. And that was kind of late in the life of the League of Nations, but I did, you know, work to find a picture, I guess, of the Soviet representative walking out. And I'm I suspect he walked out and he said, you know, I'm leaving anyway, you know, that sort of thing. Howdy, you know, like, it's like, you can't throw me out. I was resigning. But yeah, I mean, there are plenty of other examples of aggression by league members, but they are the ones who were thrown out, and it's December of 1939. So you think, don't they have other things to consider? Well, I'm sure they do. But this seemed like a good idea at the time. I mean, Finland was a member of the League of Nations. And so it's kind of like you got it coming and you didn't say you're sorry either. I mean, you know, it's not like the Soviets said, gosh, we didn't mean to hurt the Finns. We were crazy. Well, you know, they're a great neighbor and all that. No, I think it's clearly an act of aggression. So anyway, that was virtually the last thing that happened in the League of Nations was the expulsion of the Soviets. And the rest, I'm afraid, is in the history books of the League of Nations and the founding of the UN in the mid-40s. Why didn't Britain and France help Finland? Well, according to my sources, they really wanted to. They really tried to, but could not persuade the Norse and the Swedes to allow them passage. Now, you can take that or leave that. I mean, you may feel skeptical, but that is what was said by the sources, that the British and French had every intention. And would that have changed the course of history? Well, I'm not going to play that game, that what if, but presumably that would have meant that the British and French would have gone to war to help Finland. And then the Soviets would have taken umbrage, presumably. And we'll see what would have happened then. But that didn't happen. So the British and French, oh, how would you say, talked a good game. We love our Finnish friends, great people. The skiing is great and all that, you know, all of that. But in the event, there is no reason to think that there was any real help. And of course, even though former President Hoover and his group talked about it, the best really that they could come up with was what you call humanitarianism. Because there was no way that the current president of the United States, who loathed Hoover, you're aware, of course, that Hoover never set foot in the White House until 1945, until Roosevelt was dead. So I consider that a fair indication of his warmth. That, yeah, Truman thought Hoover was great, so we invited him. So that was just another little fun fact I throw out. But yeah, it won't be on the test. Okay, you could still make an A. So you don't worry about that. But I think it's in. There he is. And he is with Mayor LaGuardia. Remember him? We saw him with the former Czech leader, Czechoslovak leader, if you want to say that. I don't. I'll just say Czech leader. Yeah. And there they are, again, December of 39. You'll have lots to tell your friends about December of 39 that they probably didn't know and don't consider whether they want to know. I'll assume they want to know. And of course, Madison Square Garden, where else? That is going to be, I guess, what you call a big fundraiser. Now, the one in the back who actually died in 1944. He may or may not be familiar to you. He was a Dutch American. I mean, a native Dutch, and then he immigrated to the United States. He wrote books, one of which was The Story of Mankind, which came out, probably originally in the 1920s, and was a celebrated history for children. In other words, he could write history that could appeal to young minds. I don't know about now, but in the day, back in that time. So he was involved in this movement. So they had some pretty big hitters who would be speaking. And again, I think of this as being a massive fund drive because there was no idea of the United States going in or anything of the sort. This was more like, let's take care of the Finnish people, as well as you saw in that particular, what shall we call it, newsreel, I guess it was, that was concerned. But, of course, it was all to no avail. Meanwhile, what about Finnish propaganda? And I thought this was interesting. And how about this? And I never even had Finnish 101. How about that? But I just thought when I found a translation, because I was curious, there is our Finnish, gosh, I guess you have to be a skier to join the army, wouldn't you think? I don't think you would be too good if you said, oh, I just have two left feet, you know, that sort of, I don't think so. I think you pretty well assume that you're good on the ski, and then we're going to give you rifle training. Yeah. So now you just have, like, what would you say, Freddie Finn, and he's just hanging out. And so look, see, and that hand is saying, like, you need to get off your, you know, and we got to fight. You know, those Soviets are dangerous. Come into the volunteer corps. Yeah, right. So, yeah, that's the idea. Think about how brief this is going on. We're talking very end of December because this particular conflict will not have a long way to go. There they are. Could you, I mean, I think it's beautiful. I mean, the snow and all that, but I really, really like the South. I mean, our South. I mean, it's just, yeah, but it's just real pretty in the picture. But we're just talking about driving in the snow. Not me. And I don't want to be near those people who speed too. The ice. But it's just so bizarre to think about all those weapons and all the skis, because I associate skis with, you know, like, you know, just the good times and Aspen or wherever you bourgeois go. But yeah. Are there regular places for skiers, or is it all kind of like upper?
Well, regular guys.
Regular people ski? Okay. I just thought it was something for you. Big shots. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm just glad to know that. I'm very concerned about. But these folks, they were out there, and you think, gosh, that's very patriotic. And they were good at sort of disguising themselves. And so there were a lot of Soviet casualties, no doubt about that. I mean, Finnish too, but they did not give up without a strong fight. The Finns understood, ultimately, the Finnish civilian authorities understood that further support for a war against the Soviets could lead only to continued devastation and destruction. So the Finnish civilian authorities basically headed not that far, I guess, over to Moscow. I mean, far, but not that far. When you think about Finland and the Soviet Union and the relationships of the two, because it is right next door. I mean, the city that we now call St. Petersburg, which back then they called Leningrad, was just a hop, a skip, and a jump, you can say. In any event, the Germans were sort of in the background because while the Soviets were trying to take Finnish territory and did so, the Germans were saying, maybe we can be supportive of you, you know, that sort of thing. So until 1944, the Finns maintained a kind of pro-German stance, not outright, but enough that it was difficult for Finland as 1944 was about to turn to 1945. So that will change. And that was very good for the Finns, because as you know, the German cause was lost, and as it was lost, it is certainly true that Finland will now have a very interesting and difficult stance to maintain. I mean, would you like to live next door to them? I mean, the Soviet Union? I think it was tough. I always think about that. Because remember our friends in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? Gosh, all those years of being under Soviet rule. I was so happy in 1991. I don't know what you were up to then, but I was so glad when those three got their independence back, because all those years. And somehow the Finns, I'm not fundraising, I'm just saying, the Finns were able to maintain an independence. So it's a very interesting story to me. The war ended in March, and we have one less member of the League of Nations, not naming names, but I think you know. Bad country, bad country. Yeah. I love this. I'm assuming this is European, but again, I feel like painting the town red. Yeah, remember that expression? And then, of course, look at the Russian. And of course, he's carrying blood. We're Soviet, so we're bloody, and we're just, and not pleasant looking either. We need a shave. Yeah. We seem unkempt. I think that's what I'm getting at. And of course, hammer and sickle. And so, crucifix in the background. So we're getting the idea, fans, good Christian people, Soviets, not so much. So there you have it. And then I got all worked up about a city that still exists today, thank goodness, but it's a Russian city. But it was a Finnish city at that time. There is so much mixture in these stories between Sweden and Finland and Russia, I guess you'd say now. But in this case, I guess in Finnish, it's Vipery. There is so much confusion about which is what. That is to say, geographically speaking, this area I became curious about from the point of view of the war. And can you imagine they had television and other kinds of media back then? Because the scenes we have all seen on television. And this is, of course, a scene from this city of Vilpur in what is now Russia, would see this church. And it's a Lutheran church, by the way. Because at first I thought, well, it's probably too far north to be Catholic, so probably Lutheran, and it was indeed. And you notice you don't see the kind of ornamentation that would represent Catholicism. But they did a number on that church, didn't they? And as I say, that kind of photographic evidence would have been so significant in today's world. But in that world, it's just there and you're aware of that. Former President Hoover would bring it up to the Americans. But what were people going to do? Well, the answer is nothing. So there it was. And the war came to an end, and I even have my New York Times, which was probably about a nickel then. $4 now. Yeah, $4. Yeah. So a nickel, 5 cents. Now, what could you buy for 5 cents now? I'm not thinking much, right? This yellow newspaper, Moscow announces peace treaty signed, but Helsinki delays ratification. So that's a big headline. But it did make the top. So it was somewhat a big item, I suppose, from the international perspective. Now, as far as Finland's concerned, you see the red areas. And that means that the Soviets are going to say, well, you're going to have to pay a little, because I think we can all assume that from the perspective of the Soviet Union, sooner or later, the Germans are going to come knocking. So if they were concerned about the possibility of the Finns being either willingly or unwillingly an accomplice for the Germans, then we want to act on it. And that's exactly what this is all about. Taking territory that will allow the Soviets to build more bases and to strengthen themselves, because that will be very important, because of course the Germans, as you know, in the future are going to plan their invasions of 1941 and using this area to reach the Soviet Union. So this is what? A little over a year before the German invasion of the Soviet Union. So it's kind of interesting. So the war ends in March of 1940. And as it ends, it's fair to say that the Finns and Soviets saying now, can we love each other? No, I don't think so. I just think it's like uneasy, and we're watching you, sort of that particular attitude in terms of the Soviet Union and Finland. Sir.
Are those areas still Russian areas?
As far as I'm aware, they are. Yeah. I mean, they never went back. Do you remember that church? I was fascinated by that, because that city went to the Russians. And and you know this, I'm sure you've heard this, I'm sure that true in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and all these places. They move in Russians into those places and settle them there to make them, what would you forgive my Russian eyes. And they do that. I guess they probably in Ukraine also. Basically, we move in the people. I'm not saying they're willingly say, God, we can't wait to move. But yeah, get the van and yeah. It's not like coming to Auburn or something. It's like, but you will move because we're gonna have a Russian community. I've seen this in terms of those Baltic republics and other places, because we want that Russian area. And now we said, are they gonna leave if those areas end up? No. I mean, they stay there. But yeah, that's a very good question. No, as far as I'm aware, they did not get returned. And again, you have to remember the dynamics. I mean, the Soviet Union was a winner in World War II. So it's not like the Finns are going to say, because the Finns record was kind of like, little German here, a little allies there. And so I think you can fairly well say that was gone. Now you're wondering about their relationship. Can we go on hurting each other? Again, that is right there at the Brenner Pass. Some of you been there. A very interesting area, that rail station. And you said, but that's in the Austria area. What Austria? Look, Mom, no Austria. Yeah, remember that was March of 1938. Austria is part of the Greater Germany. Yeah, we've got that. So if Il Duce has something to say about it, he should have said it by now. In any event, we got all the troops, all the Italian troops there, all spit and polished. I presume they're trying to impress the Fuhrer. So he'll say, gosh, Benito, you really got them great scene. So they have a meeting. And again, it's interesting to ask yourselves, why the meeting then? And I think it's probably because there are probably some mixed feelings on both sides about where is this going? What are we going to do? And of course, I mean, the whole issue of like the invasion of Poland. I don't think, it's not like Mussolini can say, I want to go to Poland too. Yeah, it's not like, we'll be there together. But that didn't happen. No, I mean, you remember in June of 1941, you think a lot of Italians are right up there? Yeah, let's go to Leningrad. Come on. No, I mean, forget it. They got their own problems. So, but we love these photo ops, don't we? So they're right there at the rail station in March of 1940. And by November, they are ready for a big show. But Mussolini, I suppose, is not willing to go in person. It's sort of like, those know about, somebody will be too sick, somebody will have to pick it up if I win the Oscar. You know how that is. My health failed at the last minute. So who does he have? Well, you guessed it, the son-in-law. He's sitting right next to Hitler, Count Chano. He's there, and we have the von Ribbentrop. I think is he in uniform? He looks to be in uniform to me. And he is probably acting as MC. And you will notice in the background. And of course, you say, so it's multicultural. Japanese, yeah. We are getting aboard. We are getting aboard. That's why we call it try. Why, oh, why are the Japanese here? You're asking yourselves. I know. I wonder about this a lot. What did they really have in mind in Tokyo? Well, I think they had in mind the idea that the British and French would be preoccupied with Germany. And of course, that would mean that they, the Japanese, could continue their domination of China. And they liked it that way. So, in any event, I think that is a Japanese representative right there on the other side of Camp Chano. Right there, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And you say there are others who are waiting in the wings. Yes. Our friend from Slovakia. Yeah. And Father too. Yeah, gotta get that right. And the Hungarian. You said, what's Hungary doing in a place like this? Well, I'm glad you asked because I've got a whole talk about it. You're going to be filled with Hungarian delights when I finish with you. Yeah, because that is a very interesting subject, Hungary.
It's admiral to you.
Yes, exactly. Yes, in the Navy. Yeah. But all of this is to say that this was the kickoff in the fall of 1940. Again, what's it got to do with World War II? Well, technically World War II is already going on, but it's like the more the merrier. And it's just great to have you all. And I'm just sharing these special moments. I could go on, but I'm not a Hallmark card. And so you get the general idea. Now it's time for who's coming to visit. Oh my God. I can't believe it. Everybody in Berlin is just going gaga. You mean he'll be here? Yes. Molotov. We just can't wait. Can you imagine? People are abuzz. Well, I'm not so sure about that. But you remember the Germans obviously had been to Moscow back in August 1939, and they were there in a subsequent visit. And so, it's sort of a little reciprocity. We would love, y'all come on over and visit sometime. We'd love to see you. There was an old song. You may remember, if I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. Remember that? Yeah, thank you. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm not the only one that remembers that particular ditty, but that's the idea. Like, wow, he's coming. It's amazing to think about these particular people having these kinds of experiences. Now, am I doing this right? Or
There it is.
Der Vorsitzende des Rates der Volkskommissare der Sowjetunion und Volkskommissar für Auswärtige Angelegenheiten, Molotow, begab sich auf Einladung der Reichsregierung nach Berlin, um den laufenden Gedankenaustausch zwischen Russland und Deutschland durch persönliche Fühlungnahme fortzusetzen und zu vertiefen. Reichsminister des Auswärtigen von Ribbentrop empfing den Gast auf dem Anhalter Bahnhof. In der neuen Reichskanzlei wurde Molotow vom Führer zu einer längeren Aussprache empfangen. Die Berliner Unterredungen verliefen in einer Atmosphäre gegenseitigen Vertrauens und führten zu beiderseitigem Einvernehmen in allen wichtigen Fragen, die Deutschland und die Sowjetunion interessieren. In dieser Verfassung befanden sich die meisten Landstraßen im ehemaligen Polen. Die deutsche
I wanted to share with you a lot there, and I know that you know what they were saying, but I thought it was enough that we got the tone of this official German version, and you're just thinking about, I wonder what Molotov was thinking privately. Dear diary, I had a really nice time with my new German friend. They really know how to throw a nice party. I doubt that. And could you imagine what the Germans were thinking when he comes through? You Connie. I mean, they know a lot. I mean, it's like some hurtful things that you don't say in public. Because remember, the German Communist Party had been allowed in years. And now Molotov, did you see him do his hair? And like, y'all are looking good. I'll have to tell my Bolshevik buddies when I get home about you all, just brag about y'all and your nice marches. The music was fabulous too. Yeah, I don't think so. I think this is going to test your diplomatic skills at the great height. But Molotov went through it, and they had their conference and meetings that probably went on. I don't know whether they were taking uppers or what they were doing, but I think they were meeting rather constantly for 2 days, because I mean, Molotov was on a schedule, and he did have chit chats with the boss back in Moscow. The problem is that their goals, that is the German goal and the Soviet goal, sometimes clashed in terms of certain areas in Eastern Europe. And you say, can we share? And I don't think that's going to work. Well, let's work on it. Why don't you all go east and maybe south talking to the Russians? Y'all would be so happy. Maybe you can go over to Iraq or Iran. And then we'll take care of things in Eastern Europe, and we can just love each other and care. Maybe you all could join the Axis. We would love to have you. You're thinking, I'm not so sure about that. But yeah, that was actually a proposal. I'm not sure how serious that, you know, we Japanese and Germans and Italians, we would just love to have you be part of our group. And I said, oh, shucks, thanks so much. We'll talk about it over some borscht and vodka and see what we come up with. But I don't think that was ever any realistic idea. The irony to me, of course, will be that Ribbentrop will continue, because he will be the main person meeting with Molotov. The business with Hitler was mostly ceremonial. I'm sorry you couldn't see the scenes from what was destroyed, of course, by Allied bombs after, well, the end of the war. That is to say, the anteroom to Hitler's office and some of the architecture and statues, which not exact, not the sort of thing we would want, I guess, in our living room. It's a little much, but the idea being ultimately that they ended up in a Berlin bomb shelter, Ribbentrop and Molotov. There was just, the siren goes off. It's just like we do, like in a tornado, whatever. And so this was like, those British may be bombing, so we need to go to the shelter. So they did. And Ribbentrop, who was quite the mouth runner, was saying, yeah, we've got this situation taken care of, in the West, so you all take care of the East. And Molotov says, if you really have it taken care of, then why are we in a bomb shelter? And that's like, I bet you that von Ribbentrop did not like that. He didn't like any sassy remarks. So it's just as good you're going home, Vladimir. So you can take your borscht and leave. But that would be, there they are. God, that smile. I wonder if that's genuine. Gosh, it's really nice. Now, there's the man I was telling you about in the winter. Became very important, been down from 1965. He was the official German translator for the Soviets. I mean, of course, he was German. And he was a very, very important person. And I don't think he got shipped home until maybe June or August of 1941. But you can understand that he was sort of, how do they say it, persona non grata after the German invasion of the Soviet Union. It's not like, we really appreciate your linguistic skills. We wish you could come. Your verbs and your conjugations are really great. No, I think it's okay. But as long as this was going on, he was right there with Molotov and that sort of smile of, so they had their little talk. And I think, as we would say it today, they agreed to disagree. And Molotov said, this has been real. This really been interesting. God, I'm going to miss you. This has just been special. If he came back, it was not until 1945. And I'm not sure he even came back then. But it was definitely a challenging visit. And it was challenging. And see, our trusty translator right there. He's saying, goodbye, Nazis. Hello, communists. I'm on the way home on the train. And of course, this will be essentially the end of this particular relationship. It had worked well for Poland. We each got our share, great. But in fact, any plans of saying like we can continue to work together to conquer the world doesn't seem to be going anyway. Stalin is not very impressed with German successes in Western Europe, and the Soviets have no intention of allowing Germany to have free reign. So all in all, the relationship ends in, I think you would say, negativity. Now, this is November of 1940, and the Germans are invading the Soviet Union in June of 41. So I don't think I have a lot of trouble in convincing you that this has not worked out. But I hope he had a nice trip and he will enjoy it as he returns. Next time, we'll be talking about France. And France will have its own very interesting story, I think you will agree, in terms of its future in these early stages of World War II. Thank you all very much. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
Nice way to end, with Molotov tip in his hand.
No, I love you Nazis. Just,
I think part of the thing of Hitler was a good question.